You know exactly who you're thinking about right now. I don't need to tell you. That face is already there, somewhere in your chest, perhaps without you even having to think about it. It appeared in the very first seconds of that video, and you felt it. That slight pressure, something indefinable, like a word you can't pronounce but that your body knows perfectly. You're thinking about a man, maybe someone who's still in your life, but in a way that sometimes leaves you with more questions than answers. Maybe someone who's drifted away and you're trying to understand what his silence really means. Maybe someone who never says, "I love you," but whose gestures, glances, and little everyday things make you feel something you don't yet know how to name. And you watch, you observe, you try to decipher, because you feel something. And you need to know if what you feel corresponds to something real in him. Tonight, I'm going to reveal something that the psychology of the human soul has always known, and that most people will never hear expressed in this way. It's not a list. It's not a code to decipher. It's something much deeper than that. And once you understand it, you'll never look at a man the same way again. Carl Jung, one of the greatest explorers of the human soul the world has ever known, spent his entire life studying what words cannot contain. This Swiss psychiatrist, thinker, and visionary, a man who delved deeper into the mysteries of the unconscious than almost anyone else in the history of psychology, knew something essential about love. Something that neither films, nor songs, nor magazine advice have ever truly managed to capture. He knew that true love doesn't begin with words. It begins with being, with the way a man inhabits the space around you, with what he does without thinking, with the gestures that emerge from his deepest layers, those he doesn't control, those he isn't even aware of. Jung developed what he called the theory of the unconscious, and the central idea is simple, even if its implications are endless. Much of who we are, what we feel, what we reveal, happens outside of our conscious awareness. We don't always know what we show, especially in love. And that's precisely where it all begins. Jung observed that human beings reveal what they truly feel, not in their words, but in their automatic behaviors, those unfiltered by the mind, by fear, by the social mask. A person may never say the words, but their unconscious doesn't lie. And if you know where to look, you'll see everything. It's no coincidence that you're here tonight. Something inside you wanted to hear this. There is a phenomenon that Jung documented with precision and that most people are completely unaware of. When a human being feels a deep attachment to another person, an attachment that goes beyond ordinary affection, beyond fleeting desire, their entire psyche reorganizes itself. It's as if an invisible magnetic field unfolds around the other person, and this field cannot remain hidden for long, because the unconscious always seeks to express itself. It has no mouth, so it expresses itself through the hands, the eyes, the voice, the entire body. You're not imagining things. You're not seeing things that aren't there. What you're perceiving, those subtle signals, those inexplicable little moments, those gestures that seem to transcend what words between you have ever described, all of it has an explanation. And it's more beautiful and truer than you could ever imagine. But here's what Jung would add here. And this is the part most people don't want to hear because it's more demanding than simply reading the signals. Understanding what a man reveals without speaking is also understanding what you are truly ready to see. Unfiltered, without projection, with honesty. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, let's talk about what's going on inside him. Jung observed that profound love, not infatuation, not superficial attraction, but the kind of love that transforms a person, settles in the oldest layers of the psyche. It is not a conscious decision, it is a recognition, as if something in the deepest unconscious were saying, "This person," not for a reason that logic can easily explain, but because something within it recognizes something in you. And that recognition, It transforms the way he pays attention to you. Observe a man who truly loves you, not what he says, what he does. He remembers details you didn't even notice mentioning. The name of your colleague who makes your life difficult, how you like your coffee, that book you mentioned in passing 6 months ago. A man who loves you on a deep, unconscious level, in the way Jung would understand love, doesn't remember these things because he's consciously chosen to pay attention. He remembers them because you occupy space in his unconscious. And the unconscious records everything related to what matters to it. It's not about performance. It's about presence. And presence is perhaps the rarest thing that one human being can offer another. Do you see the difference? A man can say, "I'm thinking of you," and only think of you at the moment he says those words. But a man whose unconscious is oriented toward you, he thinks of you when you're not there. He sees something on the street, and it makes him think of you. He hears a song, and he wants you to hear it. These little things he shares with you, for no particular reason, no special occasion, they're leaks from the unconscious. They're windows onto what he doesn't say. And somewhere deep down, you already knew it. Not consciously, but something inside you knew. There is one thing Jung understood about men in particular, and it is counterintuitive, so listen carefully. The men who love most deeply are often those who verbalize the least. Not because they don't feel, but because what they feel is so deeply ingrained within them that they don't always know how to put it into words. Words are a tool of the conscious mind, and true love, according to Jung, often lives far beneath that surface. Here is the central paradox of what you are experiencing. A man may never tell you that he loves you, and yet love you in a way that few words could ever capture. This is not a contradiction. It is a profound psychological reality. Jung observed that human beings have two modes of expression. The conscious mode, that of language, decisions, and confessions, and the unconscious mode, that of spontaneous behavior, glances, gestures, and involuntary attention. And in deep emotional relationships, it is almost always the unconscious mode that speaks first, and that speaks the most truthfully. A man may hesitate to speak the words because he is afraid, because he has been hurt, because his old wound, what Jung called the shadow, tells him that to name love is to risk losing it. So he remains silent. But his hands do not remain silent. His eyes do not remain silent. His body does not remain silent, and you watch all this, and you wonder if you're interpreting it correctly, if you're not just telling yourself a story you want to hear. So here is what Jung offers you as a compass, not a checklist of signs, but phases, deep currents in a man's behavior that naturally follow one another when a real love is forming or existing without words having yet found their way. The first phase, you could call it the silent orbit phase. This is the phase where he gravitates towards you without seeming to. Without any explicit reason, he finds himself where you are. He finds excuses to be in the same space. He prolongs conversations beyond what was necessary. He invents reasons to contact you. A trivial question, an article he thought he should show you, a joke that made him think of you. It's not calculated. It's the exact opposite of calculation. It's the unconscious that directs the body towards what attracts it, like a plant towards the light. And it might believe it has only practical reasons, but you, if you observe the overall pattern, you see something else. It's there, again and again, in different ways. But there. The second phase is what we could call the phase of effective memory. That's when you notice something strange. He remembers everything, the little details, things you said in passing weeks ago, preferences you mentioned only once, fears you touched upon, almost in a whisper. And sometimes he acts on those memories without even telling you. He orders something you liked at your last meal. He avoids offering you things you told him you couldn't stand. He adapts his behavior to what he remembers about you. Jung observed that emotional memory, the way the psyche retains everything with an emotional charge, is one of the most reliable indicators of a deep attachment. We don't remember things that don't matter with such precision. The brain is constantly sorting things out. And what a man keeps, what he cherishes, what he carries without realizing it, it tells you something about the place you've occupied in his inner life. The third phase is perhaps the most difficult to see because it is often mistaken for indifference. This is the phase of silent protection. A man who loves deeply, according to Jung's understanding of the male psyche, won't necessarily verbalize his protection. He'll live it. He'll make sure you get home without you asking him to. He'll notice when you seem tired, even if you haven't said anything. He'll speak about you differently when others are around, with a restraint, a respect, unlike the way he speaks about other people. He takes up space around you, not to dominate, but to create a space where you feel safe. And he often does this unconsciously, without anyone else noticing, and sometimes without you even putting it into words. It is one of the oldest forms of love, the one that predates words in the history of all humanity. The fourth phase is what we could call the phase of disguised vulnerability. This is perhaps the one that requires the most attention to be perceived, because it presents itself in unexpected forms. A man who loves you, truly deep down, will start showing you parts of himself he doesn't easily reveal. Not necessarily in a dramatic way, not necessarily through grand confessions, but in those little moments when he lets his guard down, when he says something honest about his fears, when he talks about something that hurt him once without having planned to, when he laughs in a way he doesn't laugh with everyone. Jung understood that vulnerability is one of the most intense acts of love that exist, precisely because it is never given lightly. The human psyche protects its fragile parts with instinctive vigilance. When a man begins to lower this guard with you, unconsciously, without strategy, it means that something within him trusts you on a level he may not yet have named himself. And the fifth phase is that of time. Not time as duration, but time as choice. One of the simplest and hardest to admit truths Jung posited about love is that what we truly love, we give time to. Not because we choose to do so, but because something within us seeks to prolong the connection, to slow down when the other person is present, to find reasons not to end the conversation. A man who loves you, without saying a word, will find that time passes differently when you're there. And he'll seek, often without putting it into words, to have more of it. More moments, more shared presence, more of those seemingly insignificant instants that in fact know what they are. Notice if time stretches out when you're together. Notice if goodbyes drag on. Notice if conversations keep coming back, coming back, coming back. Because something doesn't quite want to end. It's not a coincidence. It's never a coincidence. But here is what Jung would now add. And this is the part most people avoid because it demands something of them. What you observe in him doesn't just tell you about him. It also tells you about yourself. Jung had an idea called projection, and it's important to understand it so as not to get lost in interpreting signals. Sometimes what we see in others is true. Sometimes it's what we need to be true. And the line between the two is thin, and it requires honesty. So here is the question Jung would ask you, gently but directly. Are you observing the man he is, or the man you hope he will be? This isn't an accusation. It's an invitation. Because projection, seeing in others what lives primarily within oneself, is one of the most universal mechanisms of the human psyche. We all do it. And we do it most intensely in the relationships that touch us most deeply. What you feel for this man, this attraction, this interest, this hope, says something real about you, about what you want, about what you deserve, about what your soul seeks in a relationship. And looking at that head-on, not with harshness, but with curiosity, is perhaps the most liberating thing you can do right now. Because if you understand what you're projecting, you'll also be able to see what's really there. And what's really there, when a man loves you without saying it, is often much richer, much truer, much more precious than any formal declaration. Jung observed that the true work of love is not to decode the other. It is to know oneself well enough to receive what the other offers, with clarity, with dignity, without distortion. And that's your job, not his. Your job isn't to force him to talk. Your job isn't to interpret his silences ad nauseum. Your job is to remain grounded in yourself, in your own truth, in your own worth, enough to see the other person as they truly are. Nothing more, nothing less. And paradoxically, it's often when a woman stops looking for signs and begins to live fully in her own light that even the most profound men become unable to remain silent. Not because she's been playing a game, but because her presence has become an irresistible invitation. Not a demand, not an expectation, but a light. And light attracts. Always. There's one last thing I want to tell you tonight, and it's perhaps the most important. The pain you're feeling, this uncertainty, this waiting, this need to understand, it's real. Don't minimize it. Don't tell yourself you're exaggerating, that you're too sensitive, that you should just move on. What you're feeling exists because something real is at stake for you, and that matters. But Jung offers you something beyond pain. He offers you understanding. A man's unconscious isn't made of calculations. It's made of profound truths, seeking to reach the surface. And sometimes these truths arrive before words. Sometimes they never arrive clothed in words at all. But they are there, in gestures, in memory, in the time he gives you, in the way he silently orbits you. What you perceive is not an illusion. Your soul can read things that the mind takes time to formulate. And you who observe, you who seek to understand, you who refuse to be satisfied with the surface of things, you are someone who deserves a relationship in which you don't constantly have to guess. You deserve someone whose conscious and unconscious minds eventually align. Someone who shows you and tells you. Someone who orbits you silently and who one day also finds the words. Perhaps this man is capable of it. Perhaps he needs time. Perhaps what you are observing is the beginning of something still searching for its form. And perhaps, just perhaps, the most powerful thing you can do right now is to remain yourself. Whole. Present. Without reducing yourself to waiting for what he will or will not say. Because deep down, your soul doesn't need his validation to know its worth. It already knew, even before he came into your life. And it will still know, long after this uncertainty is resolved. You don't need his words to be loved. You need to see clearly. And tonight, you started to do that. This is not the end of something. It is the beginning of a more accurate reading of the world around you and of yourself. Just tell me one thing in the comments. Is there a man in your life right now whose actions speak to you more than his words? Just a word, just a sign. I read every message. Subscribe if you haven't already. And share this video with a woman who's silently watching someone tonight and needs to hear this. Take care of yourself.